So it's been 80 years, but the whole question of how Adolf Hitler actually died, it's still surprisingly, debated.
It really is. And for you listening, if you want to get the core story quickly, this deep dive should really cut through the noise.
Yeah, we're not getting lost down every rabbit hole, but we are going to look at the main arguments about, well, did he actually die in that bunker in Berlin?
Exactly. We're diving into these conspiracy theories around his death, and we'll compare them with the sort of accepted historical version, the suicide, with Eva Braun, Fear Bunker, April 30th, 1945.
And we're using the Wikipedia page on conspiracy theories about Adolf Hitler's death as our main guide here. It's actually a pretty good summary of all the different claims and the evidence or, the lack of evidence sometimes.
Right. Our goal is pretty simple. Understand where these ideas started, what they argue, what proof they offer, if any. And just as important, why do most historians stick with the original story?
We want you to come away feeling informed, basically, but not completely overwhelmed by all the speculation.
Definitely not bogged down.
Okay, so origins. Where did this stuff even begin? I mean, the idea he might try to vanish wasn't totally new, was it? Our source says the U.S. Secret Service was thinking about disguises even before D-Day.
That's a really good starting point. The Allies were thinking about it. But the real launch pad for the initial conspiracy theories, that seems to have been deliberate Soviet disinformation.
Ah, okay. The Soviets. How did they stir the pot?
Well, right after Berlin fell, June 45, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, apparently on Stalin's direct orders, tells a press conference, hey, maybe Hitler got away.
Just like that.
Pretty much. Then, a month later at the Potsdam Conference, Stalin himself pipes up, suggests Hitler might be alive, maybe Spain, maybe Argentina. Coming from them, that really planted seeds of doubt right away.
And people bought it. I saw the numbers. June 45, 68% of Americans thought he was still alive? That's huge.
It is huge. Even 2 years later, April 47, it was still almost half. You have to remember the chaos, the uncertainty, Hitler's almost mythical status. It created fertile ground.
Right. And then the newspapers jumped on it.
Yeah, you had these early reports, often not very reliable. British papers quoting some Soviet officers saying the body found was just a poor double. The Russian commander in Berlin saying Hitler was hiding somewhere in Europe.
So this Soviet stuff really gave legs to the later theories, even though the Western allies and historians were pretty quickly saying, no, he died in Berlin.
It really did act as a springboard, like our source says. It shows how powerful misinformation can be, especially right after a massive conflict like that. It created this space for alternative stories to take root.
Were there investigations early on to try and settle it? I read about Hugh Trevor Roper, the British historian.
Yes, exactly. British intelligence tasked Trevor Roper in late 45 specifically to counter those Soviet claims. He looked into it thoroughly, talked to eyewitnesses, and concluded, yeah, Hitler and Braun died by suicide in the bunker.
And he had that great quote later, didn't he? Something about people preferring legends?
He did. He reflected that the desire to invent legends and fairy tales is greater than the love of truth, which, says a lot about how people sometimes react to big, messy historical events.
It really does. And then you get the really weird stuff, like that American miner claiming he was Hitler in Kentucky.
Slight chuckle. Oh, yeah, William Henry Johnson, that's definitely out there, called himself Furrier #1, writing letters promising armies, spaceships, nuclear bombs.
Invisible spaceships.
Right. And people sent him money. It shows how some people were ready to believe almost anything or maybe just exploit the confusion. He got done for mail fraud, obviously.
Then there was a book in 47, Who Killed Hitler, by William Heimlich. He had a different angle, didn't he? Maybe a double, maybe Himmler was involved.
Heimlich, yeah. He did his own investigation, though apparently U.S. intelligence wasn't fully cooperative. Maybe thought he was just after a sensational story.
So what did he claim?
He argued there wasn't solid proof of the bunker death. He floated this idea of Himmler using a double, maybe having Hitler poisoned, staging the gunshot. He thought the Soviet survival story was propaganda, but he still ended up saying Hitler's death was a mystery without an ending, hinting at foul play.
But historians didn't really buy his theory.
Not really. People like Richard Evans basically said Heimlich was ill-informed, his theories weren't well supported. So another early alternative, but not one that gained much serious traction.
Okay, what about Arthur Mackinson, the guy who said he flew out of the bunker with Hitler?
Mackinson. Yeah, in 1948, he comes out with this story. Him, Hitler, Braun, Bormann escaping in tanks, flying to Denmark, then Hitler flies off somewhere else.
Sounds like a movie plot.
It does, and it got shot down pretty quickly. Michael Musmano, the judge from the Nuremberg trials, pointed out there was zero evidence, the dental remains were already being confirmed, And Mackinson later told an even crazier story about surviving a fighter plane attack.
Yeah.
Didn't hold water.
It seems like the wilder the story, the more press it sometimes gets. Like that National Police Gazette, they ran with this for years, apparently.
Oh, decades. From the early 50s right into the 70s, they had Hitler fathering kids, being in great health, escaping to Antarctica, South America, you name it.
Wow.
Even Heimlich wrote for them for a bit. Richard Evans calls it making a career out of these stories, just feeding the public fascination, really, with totally unfounded stuff.
And the Soviets weighed in again later with Bezimensky's book in '68, the one with the autopsy report.
Yes, the death of Adolf Hitler. It presented this supposed Soviet autopsy, claiming cyanide poisoning was the cause of death.
Okay, so that should have been definitive.
You'd think, but no. There were big problems. No record of an internal organ dissection to confirm poisoning, and it completely contradicted eyewitnesses who mentioned a gunshot. Plus, Bezimensky himself later admitted he was basically acting as a party propagandist.
To push a specific narrative.
Right. To downplay the gunshot, make it seem less like a soldier's death, perhaps. So, Western historians pretty much dismissed his claims as politically motivated, unreliable.
It's just layers upon layers of conflicting stories. And our source mentioned something pretty disturbing, too, a link between some people pushing these survival theories and far-right groups.
That's a really important and quite dark aspect. Richard Evans points out that for some neo-Nazis, white supremacists, the idea of Hitler dying, a cowardly death in a bunker, just doesn't fit the image they want.
So they prefer the escape narrative.
It seems so. For them, he remains this sort of inspirational figure, bizarrely. And Evans also notes you get fringe groups, occultist UFO believers trying to attach their own ideas to Hitler's supposed escape, maybe just to get attention. It shows a really troubling side to why these theories sometimes persist.
Okay, let's switch gears to the actual evidence. What do we really know? The dental remains seem to be the anchor, right?
Absolutely. That's the core biological evidence. May 1945, the Soviets find a jawbone fragment, some dental bridges near the bunker.
And they knew it was his.
Well, they brought in people who knew his teeth. His dental assistant, Katha Heuserman, his technician, Fritz Ekman. They identified the work. Later, his actual dentist confirmed it based on records and x-rays. It was quite specific dental work.
And that's held up over time, been rechecked.
Yes. Redar Soides, a forensic odontologist, looked at it again in the 70s and confirmed it. And then, much more recently, 2017, a French team under Philippe Charlier examined them again.
What did they find?
They said the teeth were in perfect agreement with an X-ray of Hitler from 1944. Charlier was very clear. It's scientific proof he died in Berlin in 45.
Okay, that sounds pretty definitive. But what about that skull fragment with the bullet hole? That caused a stir, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah.
Found in 46, near where the bodies were supposedly burned. For years, the Soviets seemed to think that was Hitler's skull.
No, it wasn't.
Turns out, no. In 2009, Nick Bellantoni, a bone specialist, examined it. He said the bones seemed too thin for a man. The sutures looked like someone younger than Hitler.
And DNA testing confirmed that.
Yep. DNA tests showed it belonged to a woman.
So, ammo for the conspiracy theorists, I guess. See, the Soviets got it wrong.
It definitely fueled their arguments.
Yeah.
But a couple of caveats. They did find male blood confirmed on Hitler's sofa in the bunker. And the Russian State Archive later clarified they'd never officially claimed that specific fragment was Hitler's. Plus, Charlie Excomie pointed out, it's hard to tell sex from a badly burned skull fragment anyway.
So the skull fragment was a red herring, basically. The dental evidence is still the main thing. What about all those FBI files? The ones with alleged sightings everywhere?
Ah, yes, the declassified files. They are full of reports. Hitler, seen in Argentina, Spain, allegedly had plastic surgery, shaved his mustache, you name it.
And did the FBI believe any of it? Did people like Eisenhower?
Well, figures like Eisenhower and Kennedy did express some early speculation, maybe uncertainty, but the FBI files themselves, they consistently say none of these sightings could actually be verified, not one.
So the FBI just had to record every claim that came in.
Pretty much. Richard Evans makes that point. They had to document even the erroneous or deranged stuff. And Donald McHale, another historian, stresses that after looking through all those files, there's just no credible evidence Hitler survived. Zero.
So despite all the noise, the historical consensus holds firm. Suicide, April 30th, 1945. And the lack of more forensic evidence is down to the bodies being burned.
That's the accepted view. Now, some people, like forensic biologist Mark Benek, have questioned how completely a body could be cremated in the open air, given body water content and things.
A technical point, but interesting.
It is. But historians like Anthony Beevor and forensic experts like Charlier still say that dental evidence is key. They actually support DNA testing the jawbone itself, while being very clear the teeth are Hitler's.
Okay, let's talk about the most popular theory, probably. The escape to South America. That one
Yeah.
seems to have real staying power.
It absolutely does. A lot of it seems to trace back to claims like those from Philip Citroen in 1955, reported in a CIA document that later got declassified.
What did Citroen claim?
He said he was an ex-SS trooper, claimed Hitler was alive, had moved from Colombia to Argentina around 55. He even supposedly had a photo of himself with a guy he called Adolf Schittelmayer, claiming that was Hitler.
And the CIA jumped right on it.
Not exactly. The document shows they were pretty skeptical. They couldn't really evaluate the info. The source wasn't necessarily reliable, and they decided not to pursue it further. Too flimsy.
But that story didn't die. There was a book just last year, 2023, by an Argentine journalist, Abel Basti, picking up on Citroen's claims.
Right. Basti argues Citroen was actually Dutch, not SS, and says the photo is proof Hitler was alive then. He claims to have investigated in Colombia where the photo was supposedly taken. Basti's put out other alleged photos of an older Hitler, too.
Is that taken seriously by historians?
Not widely, no. It lacks strong, independent corroboration. It remains very much in the realm of conspiracy theory.
And then there was that book, Gray Wolf, back in 2011, that painted a really detailed picture, didn't it? U-boats, Argentina, the Perones.
Grey Wolf was quite elaborate. It proposed this whole scenario. U-boats smuggling Nazis and looted treasure to Argentina, Juan and Evita Perón helping out, Hitler living first at one remote ranch, then another even more secluded one called Enalco.
And it claimed he lived there for years.
Yeah, suggested Eva Braun left with a daughter in 54, and Hitler died there in 1962. It even threw in Martin Bormann supposedly trading secrets and art to make the escape happen.
But how did historians react to that?
Mostly with dismissal. Guy Walters called it rubbish, appealing to diluted fantasies, and argued something that big couldn't possibly have been kept secret.
Makes sense.
Richard Evans slammed its reliance on shaky sources, lots of hearsay. Donald McHale said it just connected dots that weren't really connected, based on association and iffy evidence. So, again, not accepted by serious historians.
What about that History Channel show, Hunting Hitler? They seem to lean into the South America idea using declassified files and interviews.
They definitely explored those angles, yeah. It brought the theories to a big audience. But it's crucial to remember they were exploring possibilities, often very remote ones, not presenting proven facts.
So even people on the show didn't necessarily believe it.
Right. James Holland, a respected WWII historian who was on it, made it clear afterwards he never actually believed Hitler or Bormann escaped. The show generated buzz, but didn't change the historical consensus. It's kind of telling that the National Police Gazette loved the series, though.
Yeah, figures. So just quickly then, how has all this shown up in pop culture? Seems like fertile ground for fiction.
Oh, totally. The what if Hitler survived idea is irresistible for storytellers. You see it in novels like On the World's Roof, cheesy old movies like They Saved Hitler's Brain.
Chuckles. Okay.
Even The Simpsons had Bart prank calling an elderly Hitler in Buenos Aires. More seriously, George Steiner's novella, The Portage to San Cristobal of A.H., explores it. More recently, video games like Persona 2 had a rumor about Hitler escaping become reality in the game. And that Amazon show Hunters had him living in Argentina in the 70s.
So it's just this enduring cultural trope, really.
Exactly. It taps into that fascination, that unease around his end, even in purely fictional ways.
Okay, so wrapping this up. We've looked at a ton of theories, claims, counterclaims, but at the end of the day, the historical and scientific evidence, especially those dental remains, backed by eyewitnesses, points overwhelmingly to suicide in Berlin.
That really is the bottom line. The Soviet disinformation gave the initial theories a boost, but they've kind of taken on a life of their own since then.
And you have to wonder why they persist, don't you? Is it just hard for some people to accept such a, well, an ignominious end for someone so monstrously powerful? Or is it tied to those darker ideologies we mentioned that still want to see him differently?
Both are probably factors. It's complex. So maybe a final thought for you listening. Why do these stories hang around, even with so much evidence against them? What does it say about how we engage with history, with information, maybe even our desire sometimes for a more, I don't know, interesting story than the factual truth?
Yeah, something to chew on. It definitely highlights the power of misinformation and why it's so important to look critically at the narratives we encounter about the past.